Hey folks, this is Waylon Lewis coming to you live from Boulder, Colorado. I'm wearing tweed on the occasion because I'm here to talk about a very tweedy subject, journalism. So I've had two relatively intelligent to very intelligent. That's the range of their intelligence, I'm guessing. They could be stable geniuses at the extreme. People on my Facebook wall in the last 24 hours alone say, I don't believe this story. It's fake news. How do we know if journalism is real? The New York Times is evil, that kind of stuff. So let's talk about fake news versus journalism, because if we don't know the difference or how to identify the difference independently in a way that you can trust, we're going to have another big poopy face in the White House and a whole bunch of more poopy faces in government and a bunch of poopy faces being poopy all over the planet. And we don't want a poopy planet unnecessarily. I think I just switched to the children's program on Elephant Journal. So you don't want things to be poopy. So fake news. Generally, if something is super partisan, that doesn't make it fake news. That makes it opinion. So there's journalism over here, then there's opinion right here, which needs to be transparently identified as opinion, like on the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever. It needs to say opinion or editorial. So journalism is 100% fact-based. And if it makes a mistake, which it does, it needs to identify, it needs to correct itself, and it will. So if you see corrections in a newspaper or website, they're probably doing journalism because they're kind of being mature. It's sort of like a person who says, hey, I'm really sorry I sent you to that lunch place. It turns out that place is poopy. Then you have editorials. That's just opinion. That is not journalism, but there's nothing wrong with it because humans have opinions, right? So that's an interpretation of the news, of what's going on. And then you have fake news over here. You also have a little category called sponsored news, which is basically advertising in kind of journalism form. And that also needs to be identified. Nothing's wrong with it if it's transparent. Nothing's wrong with that opinion if it's transparent. And journalism is journalism. So how do you know if something is journalism? Well, they have to be very clear about their sources, even if they can't be clear about their sources. So like in the whole Watergate thing, they identified some source who was off the record as Deep Throat, right? And it was incumbent upon those two reporters and their editor-in-chief, Ben Bradley, who is played by Tom Hanks in the current movie, and Katharine Graham, the publisher, played by Meryl Streep. I haven't seen the movie, so I can't speak to it, but it was incumbent on them to trust that source. So that source turned out to be a high-ranking official in the Nixon administration, and they felt like they could trust him. He couldn't go on the record, or he wasn't willing because of his role in the, he was a whistleblower, basically. So they had to trust him, and that's a very questionable thing to do. Journalists are much more comfortable with sources on the record. But if a source is a trustworthy, high-ranking official, privy to certain knowledge, like what's his face? Edward. What's his face?
Murrow.
Huh?
Murrow.
No. The guy who the whistleblower about all the NSA surveillance in the U.S. in the last couple of years. Snowden. Thank you. So that guy, in my view, was incredibly fact-based, incredibly democratic, incredibly patriotic. He really cared about our people's right to know what the government was doing to us. And now there's rumors, by the way, that Amazon Echo and what's the Google one? Google Home. They're also listening. And obviously they're listening. We know that, but that the government also can backdoor into them. So anyway, I'm getting off the subject. Journalism. So they have to have good sources. And if they're off the record, multiple sources off the record help make that real. Or high-ranking, trustworthy sources off the record, right? So if I go to Donald J. Trump and I say, hey, will you tell me what the negotiations are going on about keeping the government shutdown from happening? And he says, look, I'll tell you everything, but I'm going to be off the record about it. I don't want to mess up the negotiations, or I don't want my name to be identified. You would say, okay, Donald J. Trump, our president, is privy to all this information. This is a trustworthy source. He may have an agenda, so we need to identify as much of that agenda or keep it in our mind, but we can use his information. So journalism, and then fake news over here. Usually, obviously, they're trying to monetize. Like the biggest fake news that was anti-Hillary in 2016 election, they started out pro-Hillary, but no one read it. So then they went to anti-Hillary, pro-Trump, and everyone went crazy for it. So a lot of fake news is really just money-driven. It's not even agenda-driven. But then, like with McCain and Bush, someone in the Bush campaign released all this stuff about how McCain had fathered a black African-American child out of wedlock in an affair in South Carolina, and none of which was true. McCain had adopted a child, and that fake news destroyed McCain's election in South Carolina, and he was the front runner at that point, and he lost the primary against George W. So we literally got George W. because of fake news. Fake news is a new thing through technology, but it's an ancient thing. It's called lying. So we just need to be able to identify it. So it's fine to be cynical about journalism, but it's not fine to be kind of a conspiracy theorist about it. You need to be able to say, okay, this is a reputable paper or publication, and they have ethics. And yes, they may have an agenda. They may make mistakes, but I can trust them. It's just like having a friend, and you say, okay, they may have an agenda. They may make mistakes. They may be imperfect, but they're ethical, and I trust their heart. So papers that I trust on the conservative side, Economist. On the more moderate, I don't agree that they're liberal. New York Times, Washington Post. It's easy to say they're liberal because they might be critical of Donald J. Trump, but they were critical of Obama as well. People are critical or complimentary based on what's going on. So that's it. I hope that was at all interesting. Relephant Academy, where we teach you how to turn your hobby or your current career into your kind of dream career and monetize it and change the world for the better. It's called Right Livelihood in the Buddhist tradition, how to do what you love, what you're good at, what you can pay your bills doing. Is anyone sick of me doing this little weird hand gesture yet? That's Relephant Academy. The deadline is Friday at midnight. That's like a day from now, a day and a half. The link is in the sidebar, and I hope you're all great, and I hope we can support quality journalism. The best way to support it is to read it, to share it, and to subscribe to it. Stop, whether you're liberal or conservative or libertarian or whatever, stop sharing partisan news that happens to agree with you. The bubble is unhealthy. We Americans need to be able to talk with one another with respect, even when we disagree. I don't like Donald J. Trump. However, I'm happy to host articles about him by supporters of his on Elephant Journal, as long as they're thoughtful and we can have a dialogue about it, and as long as they're fact-based. So that is where Elephant is at. We don't have an agenda other than being good to the planet, being good to you, being good to me, being good for all people. So that's it. If there's any comments or questions, I'll review real quick. I know this is a smaller one. Whenever I talk about, like, I don't know, if your ex-boyfriend is narcissistic in 18 different ways, there's 5 billion people watch these videos. But when we talk about things that actually determine everything, like what got the Me Too movement rolling, right? It was a 10 years of work exposing Harvey Weinstein and getting folks on the record. Nothing is more important than journalism, because journalism is sunshine, exposing the dark corners of humanity. It also can be fun too. Journalism can be a risotto recipe, right? Is this love? Dwayne, sad days when you have to check the news before you can believe it. Yes and no. I mean, I think it's always good to know your sources, right? Alexander, journalists lost their credibility during the last presidential election. That is for both sides. It is ridiculous how they skew even the simplest of stories. I can't agree with you, Alexander. There is journalism, which is just reporting facts, and there may be some interpretation of those facts. But, you know, what's happened online, the world of kind of new media is coverage without accountability. I see my liberal friends sharing like Bernie Sanders is God kind of blogs. That's just as ridiculous as the other end, right? So the point of this video is how to identify trustworthy journalism. Journalists, by definition, have to work based on facts and sources. And if they don't, they have to call themselves out on it. No one's perfect. The New York Times is totally biased to the left. I'm going to guess, Carol, that you don't read it. So I frankly don't agree with you. You know, people love to paint, like Stephen Colbert had a joke about that. He said truth has a well-known liberal bias. People love to paint whoever they disagree with as partisan. New York Times editorial page may be biased to the left. New York Times writers may be liberal 60% or 70%. I think it's probably 63%, I think I read. But the craft of journalism forces you to focus on facts. And, you know, there's nothing liberal about caring about our environment, caring about workers' rights, caring about the economy, caring about honesty, caring about honesty from our politicians, right? So, frankly, I think your bias is showing, but your bias is showing. You can cover it up. All right. Turn that poop to compost. Thank you for being a journalist of journalism. Yeah, exactly. Boulder knows what's up. Fake news, the difference. Okay. Let's stick to inspiring messages and love from your site. Daniel, that I think, frankly, your privilege is showing. If you're gay or, you know, you lost your job, or like in Texas, in Denton, you think Texans all love fracking and oil, right? Well, fracking and oil in Texas benefits the very rich. What else is new, right? So the good citizens of Denton in Texas sued to stop fracking because all their children were getting nosebleeds and asthma and couldn't breathe. They weren't literally allowed to play outside because the air was so messed up from all the fracking. So they stopped fracking in their town, and then Texas said, no, towns can't vote to ban fracking, right? So politics affect life. I think what you're saying is don't be partisan. I agree with that, Daniel, but politics affect our environment. They affect our economy. They affect equal rights. They affect your right to whatever, you know, the Bill of Rights, to bear arms, to free press, to free assembly, right to protest. You want all of that. So you can't really just turn a blind eye. Jesus, in fact, talked about that. Don't turn a blind eye. Don't stick your head in the sand like an ostrich. I'm not sure if they actually do that. What are they doing when they do that? Okay. Mary, everything written is all opinion. I think that's one extreme. Like there's nihilism and then there's absolutism. Everything written is all opinion. There are facts. There are numbers. In the great words of Senator Daniel Moynihan, you're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts, right? Is gravity a fact or is gravity an opinion? If you hold a big heavy piece of iron above your head, are you going to say that's opinion, or are you going to say gravity is fact? I'm pretty sure there are facts in this world. There is science. Yes, there's an interpretation of that. Facts are different depending on what you believe in. Literally, that's what Donald J. Trump wants you to believe. Facts and science are not totally relative. We can have a common discussion around facts, liberal or conservative. We're all in this together. It's like literally we're in a canoe together. We can't just tear apart the canoe. We need to figure this out and be able to talk to each other. William, as a journalist, I see value in reading and viewing multiple sources. I'll watch both Fox and NBC, read NYT and The Economist, read multiple perspectives on the same story. I bow to you, William. Amen. That said, Fox and NBC both are kind of extremes. Are they doing journalism? I don't see a lot of journalism in either. I see a lot of opinion and a lot of entertainment. I'm much more in the school of like, let's read The Economist, which is doing good journalism from a more conservative end. New York Times, which again, I don't really agree is liberal, but they're definitely in their editorial page are liberal. But you need to be able to distinguish between editorial and journalism. Either way, check your facts. Yay, journalism. Exactly, Bridget. We need a movement to support civility. Amen, Lori. We can remember how to disagree agreeably, to disagree with respect, right? When you're talking with your friend about where to go to lunch, hey, where do you want to go to lunch? Let's go to, the beer pub and get a burger. You don't like scream at them and attack them for that and say, to hell with you. I'm going to the Chinese place. You're a jerk. You just decide where to go for lunch, right? That's what we need to do in politics in America. We just need to be civil. Okay, any other comments? Ding dong. You top notch. You top notch. Yeah, I mean, facts can be manipulated and used, but if you come back to the facts, facts are facts. Right. So I basically agree, Sarah. Jordan, true. Journalists deal in truth. Remember that journalists, here's an interesting question. What's his name? Anderson Cooper. Is he a journalist? No, he's doing entertainment. Does he do journalism? Yes, I think sometimes. But you need to realize that a lot of these people who are talking on TV or who have websites or myself, many of these people are not always doing journalism. Sometimes they're doing entertainment. Entertainment can be fine. I love Anderson Cooper personally, but that's because I know him. I've judged him. Judging is not bad. Liberals or spiritualists of the world, prejudging is bad. Prejudice, right? Judging is based on facts. Remember the image of justice, the lady who blindly, in a good way, weighs the various truths, right? She's not biased. However, even the most disciplined journalists will present the truth in the light of their political beliefs. True, unbiased presentation of facts is extremely boring to read. Yeah, but I kind of agree and I kind of disagree. Journalism does have conclusions. If you're doing journalism, you don't say, well, some say climate change is real and some say climate change isn't. You say climate change is real. It's an established scientific fact. That said, some say it isn't, and let's examine that. So there are, journalism does have views. That doesn't mean that those views are opinions. Those views could be based directly on facts. Everything, oh yeah, I already. Okay. How do you speak politely to friends brainwashed into repeating talking points and distracting conversation like Kellyanne Conway? Well, first of all, we all get a little brainwashed. We're all in our little bubbles, and Facebook literally is the biggest engine of that. Facebook is built on showing you more of what you already like. The joke is if you buy a pair of shoes, say New Balance, on Facebook, you're going to see New Balance ads for a month. So, oh, you bought a pair of shoes. Would you like to buy a pair of shoes? You're going to see more of what you're doing all the time. So we're all brainwashed in a sense. So like William said, get out, talk with different people, get offline on some level. I mean, I hate to say that as Mr. Elephant, but if you're going to be on Elephant Journal or online, go to sources that you have some relationship with and trust. Trust should not be based on agreeing. Trust should be on respect, right? If I'm conservative, I would not trust Fox because Fox is just serving me up more and more of what I want. It's like a parent serving a child ice cream and more ice cream and more ice cream because the child was happy once with ice cream, right? That's not good for the child. Not that we're children, but there is that relationship with we're getting served stuff that we consume. Why are journalists today making up lies and not reporting facts? Journalists who are making up lies and not reporting facts, and I agree that writers are doing that, bloggers are doing that, entertainment folks are doing that. They are not journalists. If you're lying, you're not a journalist. The only case where you can lie and be a journalist is if you then call yourself on that lie. Like New York Times around the Iraq War examined their role in supporting that war in editorials in depth. So it's always great to have a public editor, an ombudsman who is going to examine your own conduct. Mainstream media gets a really bad rap, but I think mainstream media generally is much more respectable, reputable, more accountable than, what's his name? Like InfoWars, that kind of world of just crazy agenda-driven people who really, their main agenda is money, 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 and sometimes hate. I hate immigrants. I hate brown people. I hate other, right? If hate is your agenda, don't support them. Don't watch them. Good journalism will present, this is from Rebecca, facts in a way that allows readers to feel something and want to affect changes in our world. Right. There can be a positive agenda of awareness. A good article will give me facts in a way that makes me angry or cry and want to do something about it. Great example is New York Times' ongoing coverage of concussions in the NFL. There is an agenda there, which is to expose the cover-up of football as basically being gladiatorial. Gladiatorial? It's a good Scrabble word, by the way. A lot of people will confuse the feeling of emotion as opinion instead of journalism. Journalists are still writers. Rebecca, check out Elephant Academy. We'd love to have you in there. You're my kind of human. Love my message. Thank you. Be civil. Best advice ever. Totally agree. Easy to agree with. Appreciating this conversation. Hillary for jail. Kate, you sound fun. So what you're saying is basically something you already think. It's like a slogan. It's like having a conversation with someone, but all they'll say is "Make America Great Again" or "Bernie Sanders is God." Like, that's not a conversation, Kate. We're here to have a conversation. I would love to respond to you if you have a fresh thought that isn't stale from the deep recesses of your foxified brain. And your brain's better than that. So let some sunshine in there. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, exactly, Yale. We're all in our comfortable bubble. Exactly. But we can get outside of it. That's one reason I love the New Yorker. That sounds like the most Portlandia liberal statement ever. But you open up the New Yorker and there's articles about all these things I don't care about. And that's why I love it. I read the New Yorker and suddenly I'm reading about the treatment of blah, blah, blah in some prison. Something I had no idea about. I never knew or thought I cared about it. And I just read it because I trust they have great, great writing. And suddenly my brain is bigger and I know more and I'm inspired about stuff. Stephanie, my uncle is the worst. It does not matter what I say. His response is always, well, you heard that on Fox, and dismisses me. I am more a reader of all types of papers. Frustrating. Exactly. New York Times readers and New York Times, I think, would encourage people to criticize the New York Times, to question the New York Times, to say, where are your sources, blah, 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 blah. Again, the New York Times will host conservatives all the time on the editorial page. There has to be a dialogue. That doesn't mean everything's half this and half that. You don't have to equivocate. Say, well, nuclear war could be great. You know, I don't have an opinion on nuclear war. Yale, my opinion of the fake news awards on a GOP-supported website. Fake news has been appropriated by Trump and fans to mean any news that they don't like or any news that is critical. If I'm with my friend Lindsay, she would never criticize me. She's over here. But if she did criticize me, she's always positive. She loves me. She's probably my #1 fan. I mean, there's a lot of competition, frankly. A lot of people are huge fans of me. But just kidding. But literally just kidding. I'm so lonely. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, Lindsay criticizes me all the time. And that's not all the time, but regularly. And that's a healthy relationship. You know, even if she's wrong or I'm wrong, you should, any friendship or romantic relationship or parental relationship, you're gonna criticize each other with love and respect, right? So fake news doesn't mean anyone who dares criticize me. That's literally fascist. The way that Donald J. Trump is using the term fake news is exactly how, let's go with Mussolini because it sounds a little less extreme, how Mussolini treated the press. There's a commonality to how all powerful dictators view the press. And that is the press has to agree with me 100% of the time or it's evil and I'm going to ban it. And journalists get killed in a lot of countries, right? That's just shows you how important quality journalism is. William, how do you feel about the role of the editorial board at newspapers? I see their value, however, it fuels the fire in the argument that papers are biased. If the editorial slant left, it's easy for lay readers to assume the paper on the whole is liberal and vice versa, of course. William, I love your comments. This guy knows journalism. So #1, having an editorial board and publicly identifying them is good because then you can see, okay, George Shultz is on here, James Baker is on here, there's respectable conservatives, there's respectable liberals, there's respectable moderates, there's respectable people, there's women, there's minorities, there's, dare I say, the occasional white man. So it's good for editorial boards to be public, right? Which they are with mainstream journalism. It does fuel the fire. In New York Times, they generally are liberal, right? In their editorial page. In their journalism, I think they're doing quality journalism. It is important to have editorials, however, to have dialogue about opinions. Like when Mitt Romney wrote a couple editorials in the New York Times, those were powerful editorials. And frankly, Mitt Romney couldn't have submitted that as journalism. He's not a journalist, and he was there as an opinion leader, as a public servant to share his opinion. I, as a moderate liberal, loved reading his editorials, even if I wildly disagreed with the first one of them. I'm talking about the one about let the automobile industry go out of business. Second one he wrote, I think, was about Trump. Those are the two I've read. Should being a role of truth lies unacceptable? Davis, I'm going to go get high. There's a pot shop 2 doors down. Reread your comment, and then I'll understand it and respond. That's not an insult to your comment. That just means I've read it twice, and I feel like it's a Zen koan. Should being a role of truth lies unacceptable? Totally. Totally, dude. Susan, angry with the fact New Jersey is going down with the tubes as a sanctuary state thanks to a new governor. Susan, you're disappointed Chris Christie is leaving? You're in the minority there, but respect for the minority. Making our state even more populated and cheaper labor. Remember, America was founded on immigration. It's rich for any white person to criticize immigration, considering that we emigrated here. The air already stinks, and now more of it. That I agree with you. So environmental regulations protect the lives of citizens and children. Angry, 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 pissed off. I invite you to submit your thoughtful article about the very real issues that you're touching on to Elephant Journal. We'd be proud to feature you. We could put the editorial link in there, elephantjournal.com/submit. Jill, hey. Bill, hey. That's Lynn. That's kind of reading I love, though you needed to know, learn something new every day. Amen. I think you're talking about the New Yorker thing. Cajole, yes, I agree. Most of the public's response to what's presented as news is emotion knee-jerking. Exactly. A superb example is the book Distant Neighbors, Wendell Berry and Gary Snyder. Wow, that's like my fantasy dream book. So, yeah. I'm named after Philip Waylon, who is best friends with Gary Snyder, and Wendell Berry I got to meet a couple years ago at Slow Money. And we have many articles on Wendell Berry on Elephant, and both of them, and we have Gary Snyder, and we have Philip Waylon, and they're all my idols. I had no idea they were distant neighbors and wrote each other, and I have to read that like post-haste. Christine, I still can't believe Hillary didn't win. Yeah, I mean, it's very unpopular. It's very difficult to be a liberal woman kind of trailblazer, particularly with, as Hillary said, she was not comfortable with retail politics, as they call it, sort of the humano thing. She was a good stateswoman, but not comfortable with the campaigning, like her husband was. But she had other strengths, obviously, and did not share all of his weaknesses. Nancy, I am from Argentina and love to hear and see you. Excellent person and words. Love, Nancy. Love to you. Deb, listening to varied views is either reaffirming or educating with expanded view, allowing your understanding to change. One's views are limited to one's scope of education experiences. Well said, Deb. Come join me in Elephant Journal Academy. I love what you just said. That said, a lot of people say, hey, I listen to Fox because it's good to get out there. I don't view Fox as quality conservatism. If I want to read quality conservatism, I'll read thoughtful conservatives who are fact-based. I think Fox is an insult to conservatism generally. Hannity is basically a cheerleader. Like, someone get him some pom-poms. Deb, amen. Agree with you. When not rooted in evidence or fact, it's opinion only. Jill, just downloaded the Skim app, hoping to get some new avenues of info. I think I got all the comments, and thanks so much for hanging out with me on this sort of boring, serious subject. It was cool to see so many comments. Thank you so much, and please read journalism and know how to identify it. Don't read partisan, purely partisan coverage. And Elephant Academy, deadline is in a day and a half. Link is in the sidebar. Come join us. It's super fun and it's super intense. You'll learn a lot. It basically, we're giving you all the tools to kind of invest in your current career or find your dream career that is also benefit. All right, folks. Big love.